The galaxy was old, older than any one species could truly comprehend. Civilizations had risen, thrived, and fallen long before the first sparks of fire danced in the hands of humanity. For millennia, fragile but brilliant beings filled the void with light, weaving empires across stars, uniting hundreds of worlds under the cold brilliance of technology. They were clever, elegant, and advanced in every sense. Yet they shared one unspoken assumption. The more a species mastered technology, the further it drifted from the primal brutality of survival. They were wrong. Earth was cataloged early in the galactic records as a Class 10 Deathworld, a designation that made most species recoil in unease. Its gravity was crushing by galactic standards, its atmosphere thick and unstable. Storms that ripped apart oceans, earthquakes that shattered continents, volcanoes, predators with teeth made for bone, parasites with life cycles honed for relentless efficiency. This planet was not a home. It was a gauntlet. To most, survival on such a world was unthinkable. But there were humans. They were not graceful like the Kahlari with their glass-like bones, nor contemplative like the trillions of Kahlari, whose minds extended across vast neural nets of machinery. They were not elegant nor efficient. They were clumsy, stubborn, loud. A species whose existence seemed like an accident. Their bodies fragile, their lifespans laughably short, their technology barely scratching the surface of galactic norms. To the wider community, humanity was a curiosity at best, a barbaric embarrassment at worst. It was inevitable that one of the great empires would come for them. The Kahlari Dominion were the ones who chose to extend their hand first. Their empire had spanned 1,000 systems, maintained by fleets of automated warships and legions of drones. The Kahlari themselves were not warriors. They had abandoned direct combat centuries earlier, preferring to build machines that fought, calculated, and conquered for them. Their mastery of matter manipulation and plasma weaponry made them unchallenged in open war. Even their rivals, the insectoid Rallic or the crystalline Vari, respected the Dominion's reach. To the Kahlari, Earth was not a threat. It was an opportunity. The humans were notified in the usual way. A transmission, cold and precise, projected across their orbit. The words were translated into hundreds of human tongues, their tone clinical, absent of malice or kindness. Humanity was to submit. Their governments were dissolved, their industries integrated, their species absorbed into the Dominion's administrative hierarchy. Resistance was unnecessary, irrational, and doomed. The Dominion did not negotiate. They annexed. For a moment, there was silence on Earth. The transmission spread through governments and networks, igniting debate, fear, and anger. Some urged compliance, recognizing futility of opposing a power so advanced. Others bristled with instinctive defiance. But across the spectrum, a single question emerged. Was this the end? Was humanity's first contact also its last chapter? The Kahlari wasted no time waiting for an answer. Their ships descended into orbit. Sleek crescents of metal, armed with plasma batteries capable of scouring cities in seconds. Drones rained down, small at first, testing resistance, mapping human defenses, assessing reaction. The Kahlari were efficient. They measured every move before committing full force. To them, this was little more than pest control. The first encounters were brutal. Human forces fired rifles and missiles at machines that shrugged them off with shimmering barriers. Tanks rolled forward only to be carved apart by beams of coherent plasma. Fighter jets screamed through the skies, unleashing salvos of missiles that exploded harmlessly against energy shields. Entire battalions vanished in moments. The Dominion calculated probabilities, adjusted algorithms, and concluded the same thing they had known before. Humanity was incapable of true resistance. And yet, something unexpected happened. The humans did not surrender. Losses mounted. Cities burned. Governments fractured under the weight of impossible odds. Still, they fought. Civilians took up arms. Militias formed in the shadows of ruins. Old, obsolete weapons long retired were dragged from storage. On every continent, across every shattered front line, humans clung to the idea that resistance was not optional. It was inevitable. The Kahlari observed, perplexed. Their algorithms predicted surrender within days. Weeks passed, and the humans continued. They used environments the Dominion had not accounted for. Dense jungles where drones struggled to maneuver, frozen tundras that drained power from machines, deserts that swallowed entire columns. They hid in tunnels, caves, mountains. They used fire, smoke, and sound in ways the machine's sensors could not fully track. The Dominion increased force deployments. Their ships scorched landscapes, erasing strongholds in storms of plasma. Yet every strike created not compliance but fury. Every city that fell became a rallying point for vengeance. Humanity's military command was fractured, communications crippled, but pockets of coordination emerged through sheer stubbornness. Generals adapted, scientists experimented, soldiers improvised. The Kahlari underestimated not just human resistance, but human psychology. Submission was alien to a species that had risen not by hiding, but by clawing dominance from a hostile world. Predators larger, faster, stronger had tried to kill them. Disease had ravaged them. Nature itself had sought to break them. But humans had endured. They had always endured. It was not advanced technology that had carried them through their history, but something older. Fire, stone, iron, gunpowder. Tactics born in trenches, fields, and frozen forests. Wars fought not with perfection, but with desperation, with cunning, with the will to outlast and overwhelm. Now, facing annihilation by the Kahlari, that instinct awoke again. The first true shock to the Dominion came not from a missile or a jet, but from a tactic so primitive it bordered on absurd. Outside the ruins of what had once been Warsaw, a drone column advanced with machine precision, sweeping through streets emptied of life. Their sensors scanned for heat, motion, weapon signatures. They found nothing. Then the ground erupted, not with plasma or kinetic strikes, but with explosives buried deep in the earth, mines laid by hand, wired with crude detonators. The blast shattered the lead drones, their fragments cascading into the ranks behind them. In moments, the perfect column was chaos. From the ruins, humans emerged, not with plasma rifles, but with rifles firing metal slugs, with Molotov cocktails, with rocket-propelled grenades decades old. The drones recalibrated, shields shimmering, weapons pivoting. But the terrain was wrong. Narrow streets blocked their fields of fire. Smoke choked their sensors. Explosions echoed from all sides. Within an hour, the column was destroyed. The Dominion logged the anomaly. Losses were acceptable but concerning. A primitive tactic, yet effective under conditions not optimized for drone maneuverability. Adjustments were made, algorithms updated. Yet across the globe, similar anomalies began to multiply. The Dominion believed escalation would end the conflict. Their ships ringed Earth in orbit, raining precision fire on military strongholds. Their drones deployed in endless waves, metal armies sweeping across continents with the same clinical precision that had crushed a dozen worlds before. Algorithms adjusted in real time, countering mines, traps, ambushes. They believed adaptation was their strength, that a primitive species could not outthink their machines. They did not understand humanity's oldest lesson. Every adaptation was temporary. Every plan eventually unraveled. On Earth, survival had always belonged to those who adapted faster. The shift began quietly. A handful of resistance groups, scattered and desperate, began sharing information not through satellites or networks. Those were under Dominion control, but through couriers, coded messages, and even word of mouth. Guerrilla cells that had once fought alone began to coordinate. Lessons spread. A trap that worked in the jungles of the Amazon was replicated in the forests of Southeast Asia. An ambush perfected in the deserts of North Africa was mirrored in the wastelands of the American Midwest. Humanity was not fighting as nations anymore. It was fighting as a species. The Kahlari did not expect the sheer creativity of old methods resurrected and repurposed. Where their drones relied on advanced sensors, humans blinded them with smoke, fire, and reflective surfaces. Where energy shields rendered bullets useless, humans used shaped charges designed decades earlier, melting shields with raw heat and pressure. Where drones advanced in tight formations, humans broke them apart with hit-and-run attacks that bled them dry. Wars in human history had been brutal training grounds. Generations had fought with everything from swords to artillery to nuclear weapons. That history, written in blood, had been forgotten by the Dominion, but lived in every tactic now reborn on Earth. Napoleonic ambushes, Mongol feints, trench warfare, urban sieges, sabotage, all resurfaced with devastating effect. In South America, entire forests became weapons. Resistance fighters felled trees to block narrow paths, forcing drone convoys into choke points where explosive awaited. Rivers were seeded with crude mines built from oil drums and fertilizer, sinking naval drones designed for clean aquatic operations. The jungles were alive with insects, predators, heat, and disease, conditions humans had endured for centuries but which crippled machines. In Asia, mountains became fortresses. Human fighters moved through caves, tunnels, and passes the drones could not navigate. Artillery salvaged from old wars was dragged into position and fired at close range, bypassing shields through sheer impact and shrapnel. Hunters lured drones into avalanches, rock slides triggered with nothing more than ropes and levers. In Europe, cities became labyrinths of resistance. Drones designed for open combat found themselves trapped in streets too narrow for their formation. Fighters melted into ruins, striking from basements, rooftops, and sewers. Explosives were hidden in cars, toys, even the rubble itself. To every Dominion advance, there was a counter, a trick, a trap. The war became unpredictable. The Dominion's data banks recorded the losses with growing unease. Entire battalions of drones vanished. Supply ships were hijacked. Patrols went silent. Their calculations showed victory was inevitable, but the algorithms began to stretch timelines. Days became weeks, weeks became months. And then came the psychological war. The Kahlari were a species of intellect, not endurance. Their lives were spent in sterile environments. Their wars fought through machines. They had no concept of humans creeping into the dark, striking unseen, leaving carnage behind. At night, human raiders attacked drone control hubs, storming them with knives, fire, and explosives. Survivors told stories of shadows moving through the smoke, of death emerging from the dark with eyes that burned with fury. Drones recorded the attacks, transmitting footage back to Kahlari commanders who watched in horror as humans slaughtered machines with nothing but grit and steel. Fear began to spread, not among the machines, but among the Kahlari themselves. Operators who monitored the war grew hesitant, unnerved by the endless footage of brutality. They had conquered dozens of species, but none had fought like this. None had embraced death with such reckless fury. The humans did not care about losses. Every fallen fighter became a martyr. Every destroyed village a rallying cry. Children carried messages through battlefields. Old men and women built weapons from scraps. Resistance was not limited to soldiers. It was an instinct baked into the species itself. The Dominion tried propaganda, broadcasting promises of mercy and assimilation. The humans laughed. They had been ruled by kings, emperors, tyrants, and dictators, and had torn them all down. No promise could break them. Then came the biological strikes. The Kahlari's shields and armor were designed for plasma and kinetics, but they had no defense against biology. Resistant scientists, working with scraps in hidden labs, reawakened weapons of the past. Viruses, toxins, plagues once thought too terrible to use. Drones that landed in swamps corroded in hours. Alien operators who dared set foot on Earth sickened and died. The very ecosystem of the planet became an enemy. The Dominion labeled humanity irrational. In truth, they were practical. War was not won by fairness. War was survival. The story spread among Dominion ranks, whispered despite censorship. Tales of humans who fought with fire when their weapons failed. Of soldiers who charged drones with blades and explosives strapped to their bodies. Of entire towns that vanished into forests only to emerge behind Dominion lines, slaughtering their pursuers. The humans were no longer seen as primitives. They were monsters. The term spread, Deathworlders, beings forged by a planet too cruel to allow weakness. To the Dominion, it was an epithet. To the humans, it became a badge of honor. Weeks turned into months, months into years. The Dominion's clean, precise war had turned into a quagmire. For every drone they destroyed, 3 more appeared. For every ship they downed, another was captured or sabotaged. The humans no longer fought for survival alone. They fought to win. And slowly, the balance began to shift. Captured drones were rewired, their programming gutted and replaced with crude human ingenuity. What the Dominion had built as tools of control became weapons of rebellion. Entire columns of Dominion machines turned against their own, tearing apart formations in confusion before detonating in self-destruction. Alien weapons, once untouchable, were repurposed. Plasma rifles salvaged from wreckage were mounted on trucks. Dominion armor plates became barricades. Energy cores became bombs. The humans did not need to build new technology. They stole it, broke it, reshaped it, and made it theirs. The Dominion grew desperate. They deployed more ships, more drones, more resources. But the more they poured into Earth, the more they lost. Their forces were bled dry not by superior firepower, but by the grinding, merciless ingenuity of a species that refused to die. The Dominion had never known desperation until Earth. For centuries, their conquests were mathematical. They arrived, announced terms, crushed token resistance, and integrated another world. It was clean, clinical, inevitable. On Earth, inevitability shattered. Every projection stretched longer. Every battle dragged on. Every loss bled resources. What should have been a quick campaign had become a grinding nightmare. They escalated again. The sky itself seemed to burn as orbital platforms rained plasma storms across continents. Cities that stood for centuries were leveled in hours. Nuclear silos were cracked open by precision strikes, their contents obliterated before launch. Infrastructure, factories, farms, and power grids were targeted with surgical brutality. The Dominion sought to choke humanity into submission by reducing Earth to ashes. It did not work. Beneath the scorched surface, humanity dug deeper. Nuclear bunkers built during the Cold War were reopened and repurposed. Subterranean networks of tunnels spread like veins beneath the continents, carrying supplies, weapons, and people. Underground cities were carved out in secret, lit by stolen energy cores. Life continued in the dark, defying the Dominion's assumption that the destruction of the surface meant defeat. Every bombardment hardened humanity's resolve. Entire populations learned to live without sunlight, drawing strength from the very struggle meant to break them. The Dominion believed terror would shatter morale, but instead it fused humanity into something unbreakable. Nations that had once been rivals merged their remnants into a unified command. Soldiers fought beside civilians. Scientists worked with farmers. Humanity was no longer divided. It was one. The first counteroffensives began small. Raids launched from underground networks struck Dominion patrols, seizing weapons and supplies. Then larger attacks followed, coordinated assaults that targeted control nodes and supply convoys. The humans did not merely destroy. They captured. Every piece of Dominion technology that fell into human hands was studied, stripped, and repurposed. What was once alien became familiar, twisted into crude hybrids of human ingenuity and Dominion precision. Captured plasma rifles were mounted on trucks. Energy cores became bombs powerful enough to cripple Dominion armor. Drone husks were rewired into suicide machines, their programming erased and replaced with the single purpose of turning against their creators. Warships brought down by sheer human persistence were cannibalized for parts, fueling new weapons the Dominion had never seen. The brutality escalated in orbit. Human strike teams, clad in improvised armor and carrying weapons both ancient and alien, boarded Dominion ships. They did not fight with elegance but with savagery, storming corridors with shotguns, axes, flamethrowers, and explosives strapped to their chests. Dominion operators, unused to close combat, fell in droves. Automated defenses were overwhelmed by sheer unpredictability. Doors breached with thermite. Turrets blinded with smoke. Machines gutted by brute force. The Dominion had thought themselves untouchable in the void. Humanity proved otherwise. Entire ships went dark, their hulks falling into Earth's gravity to burn as firestorms across the skies. Others were captured, crude human banners painted across their hulls in defiance. For the first time, the Dominion saw their own fleet bleed. On the ground, the war turned into slaughter. The Dominion's machines, once symbols of invincibility, were now prey. Humans lured them into traps, tore them apart with weapons they were never designed to counter, and turned their wreckage into more weapons. Every defeat of the Dominion became a victory for humanity multiplied. The Dominion's leadership began to fracture. Arguments spread through their command networks. Some demanded full retreat, unwilling to pour endless resources into a single world. Others argued for total eradication. Burn Earth until nothing lived. But eradication was no longer possible. Humanity had spread too deeply, dug too far, become too resilient. Even if the surface was glass, the species would endure. To destroy them, the Dominion would have to scour every mountain, every ocean, every cavern, and still they would fail. The final battles came not from Dominion dominance, but from their desperation. They massed fleets above Earth, deploying drones in numbers unmatched since the war began. It was meant to be a decisive blow, a final crushing of resistance. Instead, it became their greatest defeat. Humanity was ready. Every lesson learned across years of blood was poured into the counteroffensive. Guerrilla tactics, sabotage, ambushes, psychological warfare, they all merged into a unified storm. Resistance fighters rose from ruins, from forests, from deserts, from mountains. Every continent ignited at once. The Dominion found themselves attacked everywhere, their carefully calculated deployments unraveling under sheer chaos. In orbit, the fleets burned. Human raiders launched from captured ships and improvised craft, swarming Dominion vessels like predators tearing at prey. Boarding actions became legends. Men and women hurled themselves into battle, knowing they would not return, carving a path through metal and flesh alike to cripple the heart of enemy ships. Entire Dominion carriers were gutted from within by squads of humans armed with nothing but explosives and fury. On the ground, battles turned into massacres. Cities that had been reduced to rubble became fortresses of resistance. Every street was a trap, every building a bunker. Dominion drones advanced into urban ruins only to vanish beneath a storm of fire. Forests erupted with ambushes. Oceans swallowed ships whole. Skies blackened with smoke as human aircraft, old, outdated, but relentless, dove headlong into enemy formations. The Dominion commanders finally understood the truth. They were not fighting soldiers. They were fighting an apex predator, a deathworld species that had evolved in chaos and war. Against such beings, technology was not enough. Shields and plasma meant little when the enemy turned nature, history, and sheer will into weapons. The decisive blow came when humanity, united under a single banner of survival, launched an assault on the Dominion's Central Command fleet. It was not a fleet battle in the traditional sense. It was chaos. Human ships rammed Dominion cruisers. Strike teams boarded flagships, tearing them apart from within. Nukes detonated at point-blank range, taking both sides with them. The Dominion fought with desperation, but desperation was a weapon humanity had mastered long before. Hours turned into days, battles bleeding together into a storm of fire and steel. And when it ended, the skies above Earth were littered with the corpses of Dominion ships. Their once unstoppable fleet was shattered, their drones silent, their command structures broken. The survivors fled, retreating into the void, abandoning a world they could not conquer. Humanity had won. The cost was staggering. Cities lay in ruins. Entire populations were gone. The scars of the war would last for centuries. But humanity had not merely survived. It had triumphed. For the first time, the galaxy saw a species rise not through assimilation or surrender, but through defiance.